Hey everybody, it's 5 minutes till. We're going to start in about 5 minutes. So everybody stand by. See hundreds of you logging in already. So once you're logged in, unless you're watching on your phone, I want to encourage you to turn off your phones or at least hide them somewhere so we can have one moment of peace in the middle of this craziness. I'll be right with you. Check, everybody wants a sound check. This is Mike. You should be able to hear me right now. If you cannot hear me, just check your mute buttons. All should be well. We're going to start in just a minute. You're welcome, Dean. 2 minutes to start time. Several hundred of you in here already. We're expecting close to 1,000, so thank you for being early today. This is the second time we've done this today. We had about 800 this morning. Now we'll probably have about the same number this afternoon. So we're standing by, 2 minutes. We'll be moving. In the meantime, take some deep breaths. Repeat after me. We're all going to be okay. One minute. We'll start in 1 minute. I was going to play some nice soothing music to start, but unfortunately, you have to have a license for that, they tell me, so I didn't want to get sued. Yes, everyone is muted automatically, Kim. Hey, Jim, thanks for joining us. I can't see your raised hands if you're raising your hand. So if you want to say something, say it to me in the chat box. I can't answer raised hands for some reason. The technology doesn't want to cooperate. Thank you, Denise. Happy to do it. Hi, Colleen. Hi, Kim. Okay, 1 minute. We'll get started. You're welcome, Carol. Hi, Georgina. Good to see you. Leon, how are you? Glad you're here. Hey, Larry, Renee, Ginger, a lot of folks. Good. Hey, Denise. My pleasure. Glad to do it. Just pay close attention to everything. Hey, Bridget, my pleasure. Hi, Diane. MJ. All right, here we go. I'm going to put my ugly mug up here, and we're going to spend an hour together and try to make sense of the senseless. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. This is being recorded. Your presence on the call, should you have something in the chat box, is an indication of your willingness to have whatever you put in the chat box public, just so you know. Okay, here we go. Hey, St. Martin, glad you're here. People from all over the world are logging on even as we speak. When we first published this seminar, when we first decided to do this seminar, we thought, well, maybe it'll help. And so it looks like a couple thousand people will be able to benefit from this today. And so I'm gonna jump in deep, and I'm gonna take you guys on a journey. What I'm gonna ask you to do is I'm gonna ask you for the next hour to do two things. So to start with, let's all do this. Everybody take a deep breath in through your nose, let it out through your mouth, as long as you're not facing somebody that shouldn't be getting your droplets. I want you to turn off your phones or put your phones away unless you are looking at me or watching this on a phone. I want you to try to isolate yourself completely from the world. Turn off any Facebook. If there's CNN on in your office, just kill it all, because we're going to spend some time trying to make sanity out of insanity. We're going to spend some time today looking at the facts, looking at the information, and creating spaces for you to feel like you're back in control of some elements of your life. But in order to do that, it's going to be really important for you just to really, really slow yourself down. So I want you to practice breathing. I want you to practice slowing yourself down. I want you to practice doing anything you can just to be fully present with me and in our close to 1,000 guests for the next hour. All right, here we go. This is all about how to stay calm and productive in times of crisis. We are in a crisis. I'm not going to make light of the crisis that we're in. But what I am going to be saying throughout this session today is I'm going to be talking a lot about what's really happening in the world. And we're going to talk about the epidemic and the pandemic first. We're going to look at some facts around that. And then what we're going to do is we are going to move from that to being able to actually look at some of the things that are going on. All right, so big breath, phones off, no social media, no nothing. Let's jump in. First thing we're going to talk about today is what is actually happening. But before we do that, I'm going to share with you a quote that I actually wrote about 6 years ago. And I don't know that it's been any more important or powerful than it is today. And the reason it's so important today is because this is exactly the thing that we're all dealing with. Once the emotions, opinions, and distractions are stripped away, reality is left. It requires courage to stare reality in the face and encourage others to do the same. Here's what I want you to think about. What we're going to be talking about for the next hour is how you can courageously strip away emotion, strip away opinion, and strip away distraction so that you can get your head wrapped around the notion of what's really happening in the space. I'm going to start with a story. The story is about a Dr. Elizabeth Schneider. Dr. Schneider is a 37-year-old PhD in bioengineering who shared her story recently on social media to give people a little bit of hope. Here's what she said. She said, the two messages that I can best help people get during this time is to take it seriously and not to panic. Here's the thing I want you to keep in mind. What I want you to keep in mind is that in order to be successful, we have to eliminate the panic. But the world around you wants you to panic. The world around you wants you to figure out how to get caught up in the melee that is panic. Now, not panicking isn't as simple as just saying don't panic. It's important that you follow specific steps. And the work that I've done for the last 25 years has prepared me for this in an unfortunate way, in that my study of anxiety, panic, and nervousness has brought us to the place where we can help you today. But what Dr. Schneider said when she got the COVID-19 virus was that as soon as she got it, she pretty much knew that she had it, but that her journey past that, and since she's recovered from that, has helped her to understand that the two things that would have made it worse and the two things that are causing people so much trouble today are the things that are making people panic. And her message was, take it seriously, don't panic. So our mantra for the next hour this morning or this afternoon is, do not panic, take it seriously. So let's jump in. First of all, we're going to talk about COVID-19 and some facts around COVID-19 so that you can get some clarity around that. First, we're going to talk about a pandemic versus an epidemic. One of the things that your brain eats for breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day is whether or not you are experiencing words that mean what we think they mean. So the definition of a pandemic versus an epidemic is important because I'm going to be talking about the epidemic shortly. Here's the definition of an epidemic. This is not Mike's definition. This is dictionary.com's definition. An epidemic is an outbreak of a disease that occurs over a specific geographical area and impacts a significant portion of the population. So if we had flu, or we had measles, or we had mumps, or we had whooping cough, and all of Florida was affected, that would be an epidemic, but it wouldn't be a pandemic. Here's the definition of a pandemic. A pandemic is an outbreak of a disease over multiple continents or multiple cultures. And what that simply means is this, that a pandemic is all about the extent to which you and I have it spread over a geographic area. Epidemic, single country, single geographical area. Pandemic, multiple countries, multiple continents, multiple geographic areas outside the country of origin. Here's why I'm sharing that with you. A pandemic or an epidemic has absolutely nothing to do with lethality. What that means is whether it's an epidemic or a pandemic, the amount of deaths are not related to whether it's a pandemic or an epidemic. However, we're talking in the news and everybody's talking about a pandemic as if that is like DEFCON 5, and the only thing pandemic speaks to is the spread of it. Now, remember our mantra, take it seriously, don't panic. A pandemic's serious. It's on multiple countries, it's on multiple continents, a lot of people are being affected. But what I want you to start to track with me on is this notion that if somebody says it's a pandemic, it just simply means multiple countries, multiple continents. That's what I want us to get clear about. Now, let's talk about what we're hearing a lot in the news about this thing called flattening the curve. If you look at a standard bell curve, most pandemics and epidemics, most things in life follow a standard bell curve. What has happened in this case, if you look at the data, and I'm going to provide as a resource to you a website that I use to track it daily, to track what's happening in the world. And if you look at what's happening in China and Japan and South Korea, you see it moving along at a slow pace, then it goes up very fast, then it flattens out, then it falls off. That's what's happened in China. So a standard bell curve means it's going along, big spike in cases, then it falls off. When we talk about flattening the curve, what the government, what the CDC and the National Institutes of Health is trying to do is flatten the curve. So the spike of outbreaks isn't as big and it's flattened out a little bit. That's all that's talking about. But what you're experiencing, no matter where you are, unless you're in China or South Korea, and I don't think we have anybody, I think we have people from the Caribbean and some people from parts of Europe, but the flatten the curve just has to do with how do we flatten out the spike in diagnosis. And right now in the United States, it's escalating. So what's happening in the government when they tell you we're trying to flatten the curve is they're simply saying, how do we slow the spike down? Because as soon as we slow the spike down and flatten the spike out, we have more chance to get vaccinations, so on and so forth. You guys all know what I'm about to say. This is what flattening the curve looks like, washing your hands. Let me share with you why washing your hands is important. The COVID-19 virus is a droplet-based virus. What that means is it's carried in microscopic droplets of liquid. Could be saliva, it could be mucus, it could be anything. It is not airborne. If you look at SARS, if you look at measles, if you look at others, when the germ gets in the air and you can inhale the germ and therefore you get it. This is not the case with COVID-19. COVID-19 is a droplet-based virus, which means you must ingest a droplet, right? Mucus, saliva, something that has the virus in it. This is important because the reason you're washing your hands and not touching your face is because if the droplets are on your hand or face, you can ingest them. So that means if I go riding on my Harley this afternoon, I'm not going to have it floating around in the air, hanging out behind cactus, trying to come out and get me. It has to be in the droplet. So when you wash your hands and you sing whatever songs you sing, it's to move the droplets out of the circumstance. Secondly, social distancing simply keeps the droplets from being transmitted or transferred quickly. Social distancing works, but it doesn't mean that it isn't going to be transmitted. It just means the chances of you coming in alignment with those droplets are going to be less. The third thing, if you're sick, stay home. The reason that this kind of sheltering in place thing is happening and this isolation thing is happening is because what the CDC and the National Institutes of Health are trying to get us to do is not be close to people so the droplets don't get in the atmosphere between me and you. This is why nightclubs are closing. This is why I went to Wendy's earlier and they only have the drive-through open. It doesn't mean that the end of the world is coming. It means we're trying to flatten the curve. It's a contribution to the flattening of the curve. So it doesn't spike as much so that we don't have as much of a spike. And then the final thing, stay away from sick people. Basically what your grandparents said, right? So in the spirit of being prepared and taking it seriously, what we're trying to do as a culture is just flatten that curve. Now, unfortunately, what's starting to happen is that the curve, non-disease curve, the curve that has to do with rational thinking and fear is becoming inverted. So as we try to flatten the curve, it's causing another curve to spike, which is called the fear curve. And I'm going to get into that in just a second. Let's look at some facts. All right, here's the moment. Dial in. I want all of you to repeat these facts to yourself over and over. Number one, there is worldwide evidence that the outbreak is temporary. China, by a multiple of hundreds, has outpaced the world in terms of the number of cases and the lethal impact of the COVID-19 virus. As of today, if you looked at the Chinese bell curve, it's largely flattened out. Now, if you want a copy of the website that I use to track this live, I'm happy to show it to you. Listen to me. It is a temporary, serious element in our culture, but temporary means this is going to pass. Most scientists think the curve will flatten out. We'll see it tapering off probably in the next 4 to 6 weeks. I'm not a doctor. I don't know. So all I want us to do is focus on the notion of this is temporary. When your brain realizes something is temporary, there is zero chance it can run away with you. But when the brain starts saying, oh my God, what if, oh my God, what if, oh my God, what if, we start to find ourselves in a world of trouble. So what I want you thinking about is just the mantra every day when you get out of bed, when you're going through your day, this is temporary. Number two, the other source of hope I want us to have is I want you to think about it. Like if you're in Atlanta or you're in New York or you're in Scottsdale or you're in San Diego and you're driving to work and everybody's been sent home, it feels to you like, oh my God, the whole world is caving in on me. But here's what I want you to get. I want you to get that every major scientific community in the world is after this 24/7. Next, in the remotest case where you may get it, there's an 80% chance that your symptoms and the illness will be mild. Now, I talked to somebody earlier today via text who actually has a family member who has COVID-19. And they said something very interesting. They said, my significant other has a mild case, but it still feels terrible because it's a virus. If you've gotten a virus or I've gotten a virus, we know it feels bad. So I want you to recite, it's temporary, everybody's after it, and 80% of the cases are mild. Now, the bigger thing is if the chances are overwhelming that if you get it, you're going to recover. So that's all we're going to talk about relative to the virus, because I'm not a doctor and that's not why we're doing this webinar. We're doing this webinar so that you can remain productive in times of crisis. But I got to give your brain a framework going into this webinar of how exactly we can be certain about what the facts are. I'm going to ask my team to attach a website that you can look at and see what's happening around the world. I don't suggest you look at it all the time, but if you really need to know, we are way down in the process, and we are way down in terms of the spread that other countries are. All right, let's talk about fear. My guess is most of you on this call, most of you on this webinar are feeling some, we will be sharing this. The fact of the matter is that what we have to think about is that the World Health Organization is issuing data that either can or cannot be trusted, but other countries are issuing data, and the other countries' data is actually better than the Chinese data. So all I want us to do is focus on the fact that it's temporary. I don't care about anything else. Yes, I will be sharing the recording. So now we're going to put that aside, and we are going to just look at fear. Here's what fear is. Fear is a negative or catastrophic prediction of some circumstance. All right, now let's focus on that for just a minute. Fear is a negative, catastrophic prediction of some circumstance. Fear is never about what is happening. Every bit of research I've participated in, every class I've ever taken, every crisis I've ever helped people and organizations go through, the first thing I want people to get is that fear is what your brain is telling you might happen. What might happen. It isn't telling you what is happening. It is telling you, be aware because the hurricane is just offshore. Be aware because you could get it. Be aware there's no toilet paper. Be aware you don't have enough food. So what I want you to think is I want you to realize that whatever's occurring right now in terms of your own fear and anxiety is occurring because a part of your brain called the limbic system is sending an alarm into your pituitary system and saying, here is a catastrophic or negative prediction. Now, let me give you clarity. The more catastrophic you believe the thing is that's going to happen, the more you fear. So there are people right now in the world. I saw a picture of a bar last night in Las Vegas, completely slammed, completely packed, people everywhere waiting to get into this bar. That's this end of the continuum. That is, I'm not afraid, there isn't a problem, it's called denial. On this end of the continuum is panic. Now here's what I want you to get. Concern, worry, anxiety, and panic are all on the same continuum. It's just about degree. So when your brain is predicting something and you feel any of that, worry, anxiety, fear, panic, it just has to do with how much you believe it's going to be catastrophic. So what we need to do is manage our brain in such a way that if we're successful, we can mitigate what that fear is so that we have a reasonable response to whatever the trigger is. Now, let me say this. Your brain, since we were roaming around on the Serengeti, has had something about the size of a walnut that rests just above your brainstem that triggers threat. It is a biological, DNA-embedded reaction to what is perceived to be a threat. Your limbic system only does one thing. It evaluates danger, it evaluates threat, and then it triggers a response in another part of your brain. So I want you to realize that whatever fear or anxiety or discomfort you're feeling is, number one, largely biological. Number two, psychological, but it's all predictive based, right? So let me give you an example. People are afraid of speaking in public. They aren't afraid of speaking in public. They're afraid of what's going to happen if they speak in public. A lot of people have lost money in the stock market. They're not afraid of what they've lost in the stock market. They're afraid of what's going to happen now that they've lost money in the stock market. This is an important distinction, because what a lot of people think is if I can do something now about what I'm feeling right now, it's going to make the fear go away. And that isn't true. So I'm going to share with you what the steps are to be able to have rational, reasonable concern without shifting to panic. Now, let's talk a little bit more about that. Let's talk about this notion of how this idea works so that we can get more clarity about that. Here's the epidemic we're going to spend the next 40 minutes talking about. We're going to talk about the epidemic of fear. Here's why. Because this is the most insidious epidemic after the COVID-19 epidemic. If you look at the number of worldwide cases of COVID-19, which is serious, and I'm not making light of it, and you look at the number of people who are walking around in abject fear or panic, the epidemic of fear dwarfs the epidemic of COVID-19. Now, somebody said to me on the webinar this morning, yeah, but fear won't kill you. Yeah, well, it'll harden your arteries. It'll make your heart beat harder. It'll increase your blood pressure. It'll give you migraines. Yeah, it will. So let's talk about how we take COVID-19 seriously, but are prepared, and how can we manage the epidemic that is clearly fear. Here we go. First of all, I'm going to give you the symptoms. I'm going to give you the disease description of fear. Here we go. It's highly contagious. It's usually irrational. It's often unintentionally yet irresponsibly spread. The symptoms are very easy to manage. Its impact ranges from mild to severe to chronic. I bet you every one of you in this room, or every one of you in this webinar, knows somebody right now who is mildly concerned, who is severely afraid, and who is chronically anxious. This is what I want us to talk about. I want us to think about these symptoms in the most practical way we possibly can. How do we make ourselves in such a way that you can get yourself to manage these symptoms? And this is what we're going to do to start. What I'd like you to do right now in the comfort of your home or wherever you are, is I want you to give yourself a score on a scale of 0 to 10, 10 being panic, 0 being you didn't even know there was something going on in the world. What number would you give yourself right now? Not how have you felt, not how do you think you will feel. Right now, wherever you're sitting, I want you to ask yourself on a scale of 0 to 10, how much anxiety, fear, or discomfort are you feeling? I'd like you to tap, thank you, Carolyn. Just put it in the chat box. Let me see what some of those numbers are so that we can start talking about it. Great, great, great. 5, 6, 3, nice. 7, 4, 8, great, perfect. Good, you guys are dialing it in. I like that a lot, really good. Good, 7 to 8, good, 7. So here's what we know. What we know is that when people, great, thank you. When people don't manage these symptoms, the symptoms replicate. So let's go down these symptoms again briefly. Highly contagious, usually irrational, often unintentionally yet irresponsibly spread. And I'm going to talk to you about how people do that. You can manage the symptoms easily. The impact ranges from mild to severe to chronic, and it reduces productivity and focus. Here's why. I'm going to read you very quickly a study from Oxford that I have studied before, but I want to make sure I don't misquote the doctor who did the study. Oxford University published in the Journal of Natural Neuroscience what panic does to the brain. Researchers found that when severe levels of anxiety or panic and anxiety are present, the stimuli create a glitch in the brain's higher order decision-making center. More simply said, anxiety and panic can cloud our judgment. Do you wonder why there is no toilet paper in the store? It is because panic and fear clouds judgment. We are never going to run out of food. It isn't going to happen. But if you walk into the average grocery store, you would think we were running out of fear. Let me read this next phrase. It's very important. Individuals under high stress tend to struggle to gauge environmental cues that could help them avoid worse outcomes. Neuroscientists at the University of Pittsburgh have found that anxiety and panic disrupts neurons that affect long-term planning, understanding rules, calculating the consequences of risk and reward, and solving problems. These symptoms have a biological clouding effect on your ability to make good decisions. Now let's go a little deeper and let's kind of examine what that actually looks like. Here's what happens. If fear goes unchecked, it shifts to hysteria. I should have put what do you call it? An apostrophe there. It's fears shift to hysteria. So when those symptoms are not managed effectively, what happens in a culture and what happens in a person is it starts to move to what is commonly known as hysteria. Now, here's what happens when people start to move to fear and hysteria. They start to judge people who are not feeling as fearful and hysterical as they are. So let me show you what happens and what the symptoms are, what happens before we prescribe how we're going to deal with it. So the first thing that happens is I feel a little anxiety. I feel a little uncomfortable. I see a line outside of Costco. There's no toilet paper at the store. They've taken all of the pasta except for the stuff that's good for you. And so we start feeling doubtful. I'll bet you every one of you on this webinar have asked yourself sometime in the last week, should I be more worried than I am? Should I be more concerned than I am? What if they're right? What if that person's right? What if the sky is falling? What if it really is terrible? Remember, the situation is serious. We need to be rationally prepared. So what we have to think about is we have to think about where is doubt starting to creep in. Now, once we become doubtful, we become more fearful. And when we become more fearful, by definition, we become more pessimistic. So we go in, we look at the stores, we say no toilet paper. Oh my gosh, let me give you an example of doubtful, fearful, and pessimistic. I was in a grocery store the other night. There was a pallet of paper towels. It was half gone. These paper towels had 6 rolls per pack. A guy pulls up his cart and he gets 6 roll paper towels. 30 rolls, is that right? Yeah, 30 rolls of paper towels. In what universe do you need 30 rolls of paper towels? And here's what was more fascinating watching him, with all due respect to his fear. He literally was looking around to make sure that nobody, and then he looked at me and he said, do you need some of these? I'm like, no, there's a half a pallet there. What he was experiencing, and a lot of us have experienced, I experienced it. I treat fear, anxiety, and panic for a living. This is my wheelhouse. And I found myself walking around the grocery store going, wow, maybe we should do something different. So when doubt comes in and fear accompanies it, we become more pessimistic. Here's what happened next. We then get what's called selective perception. Now, everybody take a deep breath because this is where I want us to really think. Selective perception is how do we get better at being able to deal with this? Because whether you're dealing with customers or whether you're dealing with yourself or whether you're dealing with somebody else, everybody's on this. So in my customers, for example, what we're trying to do is help them move forward in their business without allowing the fear to be able to get focused. So the only way we get more business, the only way we become more effective is if we understand the psychological dynamics. And selective perception is once I believe it, once I believe what's happening, I then start accumulating information that makes it so. Let me give you an example. Large company I was on the phone with yesterday. They want their sales associates to stay in the game as best they can. What's starting to happen is they're starting to shut down because they're starting to doubt that people, it was a real estate company, they were starting to doubt that people really wanted to see houses. They wanted to doubt that people really wanted to interact. And so what we did, which I'm going to share with you in a minute, is start talking about how that actually looks and works. Selective perception means once I believe something, everything in my environment, everything in my brain starts supporting that. So if I lose, if I see people not showing houses, or I see people not buying goods, or I see people overbuying, what starts to happen is people start to get nervous and think, see, there is a problem. The third thing that happens is that your subconscious starts to avoid risk without considering the consequences. So salespeople start to not do the things they've always done. Managers tend to pull back from their people. We send people home and we don't stay in as much contact with them. We don't stay in touch with our sphere of influence. We're not making the calls we need to make or reaching out and providing service. So what we're going to do is talk about how that works, because if there is fear or hysteria, you cannot be more productive. Third, there's a scarcity mindset. Once I start to believe that this is the case, our brain starts thinking there's not enough. There's not enough business. There's not enough help. Let me give you an example. I was working with a real estate agent yesterday morning on a call on an issue they were having with a contract that was starting to get a little wobbly, because this elderly couple who had the contract, who had the list, whose home was listed, started getting really nervous. So what this agent did and what this family started doing is going, well, maybe there aren't buyers and maybe there's not opportunity. And what we started doing was helping them work on the process of figuring out how to creatively build the business and help alleviate the concern. What I know is I know people want to jump the emotional reality of what's happening and just figure out, how do I get more business? You can't until you deal with the psychology. 90% of what's going on in your businesses and in your lives right now are psychologically based. Then what happens is that your cortisol starts to cloud judgment, and then the cycle continues. So let's talk about how we help people be more effective. Your brain does a ratio every single day. It says, what is the perception of danger and what is my ability to cope? Your brain all day, your customers' brains, your colleagues' brains, your direct reports' brains, your family's brains, everybody's brain's doing the same thing. Here is how dangerous I think it is, and here is what my plan is. If your plan is the same as your fear or danger, you're going to be more productive. If you're more afraid than the plan you have, you're going to be less productive. So let's look at how we do that. Your brain asks the same question every single day. It says, what will I do if? What will I do if the stock market doesn't come back? What will I do if my clients aren't out there selling or buying houses? What will I do if the pharmaceutical business, like one of my clients yesterday? Yesterday, I was talking to somebody. What will I do if? And here's what I want you to do. The only way you're going to stay more productive is if you start adding massive value to the people around you. If you start adding massive opportunities to provide value to people, let me give you an example. 2 days ago, I'm talking to the CEO of a large company. He said, Mike, what do we do so we don't lose market share and don't lose sales? Well, first of all, you're going to lose sales. That's just going to happen in the short run. But what you need to get about doing right away is adding massive value to your customers and clients in some way. I have a colleague in the Midwest. They decided that all they were going to do was double down on their sales strategy. And here's what happened. They got so much blowback for being tone deaf to what's going on, the psychology of the market, that they actually lost customers. So one of the first things I want you to think about in terms of really being productive is, how do I add value to the lives of the people that I'm working with? How do I get outside of myself and help other people deal with the situation? Maybe you take this webinar, you send it to your clients. Maybe you find an article on how to navigate challenging times. What do you do if your family's in a convalescent hospital and you're at home and you can't visit them? Here's the thing about what's happening. People are contracting. When people contract, they tend to make it more about them. When they make it more about them, they tend to shut down. So what I want you to think about is that if the brain is saying, what is the danger and how am I going to cope? The way that you cope is by starting to be outside of ourselves in terms of what we're providing to others. So here's the thing. Anytime you say, what will I do? What will I do if? What will I do if the stock market doesn't come back? What will I do if my business slows down? What will I do if I get the flu? I want you to answer the question. And I want you to answer the question by actually coming up with a plan. Now, one of the things you can do to be more productive in times like these is you can create your own plan. If you really start thinking about how you function every single day, what you'll know is that the most productive thing that you can do is talk about what your plan is going to be. Productivity doesn't happen because we pretend obstacles aren't present. And productivity doesn't happen because we bulldoze our way forward. Productivity happens when we start to get real about what's going on and how things are happening. And so what I want you to think about is I want you to think about this notion of, do you have a plan for the what ifs in your life right now? Do you have a plan for the what ifs in your business? Because if you have a specific plan, the cortisol contracts and you start being more creative about how to be more productive. So let's talk about how we can make sure that the plan is the cure. And all I want you thinking about right now is that if the plan is the cure for you, then the plan is going to be the cure for the people that you love, care about, and work with every day. It isn't about how do I drive myself into the lives of others. It's about how do I have a plan so that I can alleviate my own anxiety, nervousness, and panic, so that I can come at it more clearly and I can help those I care about do it as well. So if you just take a 3x5 card, put it on your desk, put it on the dashboard of your car, it should say the plan is the cure. The plan is the cure. Because when you have a plan in front of you, remember I said the ability to cope and the perception of danger. When the brain says, I'm afraid, what it's really asking you is, how are you going to protect me? And the way that you protect it is by coming up with a plan. If you want to get more business, if you want to be more productive, you have to start helping people figure out what their plan is for whatever it is their challenges are. But you can't help them until you can help you. Here's how we do it. What is your specific plan? I want all of you to think about what you're actually concerned about right now. What is the thing that as you think about it, you're like, here's my concern. Some of you have said more business. Some of you have said managing my anxiety. Some of you have said different things. Well, what I want you to ask yourself is, what is my specific plan for dealing with that right now? And I'm going to give you some suggestions in just a moment. But do you have a plan? Because let me give you examples of what is not a plan. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. We'll just have to see what happens. I'm just taking it a day at a time. I think taking it a day at a time is important. I talked to a client this morning, and we have a call in the mornings, and the first conversation on the call is, tell me what your plan is for today. Now, here's what we have to do. You got to have a backup to your specific plan in case things go wrong. What we're seeing in the government and what we're seeing in hospitals and what we're seeing across the country is that there are a lot of plans that aren't working out so well. So I was at the Wynn Hotel last week. The plan was we're going to stay open, and now Vegas closes today at 3 o'clock. The first plan didn't work so well. And so you've got to have what a backup plan is. Let me give you an example of a plan. If I have a client who is very nervous about managing their employees remotely, or they're very nervous about how they're going to keep sales coming in the door. I'll give you the best example I know. I'm a member of the National Speakers Association. Over 90% of our members have had, have had a significant disruption to their business. So when we're talking about a specific plan, we start talking about what are you going to do in the meantime to deal with what this disruption is, in terms of what are you going to do, who's going to support you, and how are you going to do it? Now, here's the answer you cannot give. I don't know. The I don't know part doubles down on the clouding of judgment that you're going to have with your folks. Finally, who can you rally around your plan? I want all of you to think right now, who are the people in your life who you can invite into your space that can help you think about a plan? And then I want you to think about how you do that in a way that is not subject to the whims and changes of what's going on around you. One of the things that you're going to hear me say here in just a few minutes is that sometimes what our plan is dependent on other things. And so the best plan is to say, okay, here's what my plan is. I'll give you an example. Our plan was to do certain things in our business to help our clients thrive. Several things happened relative to cancellations. That plan had to change. One of the things that you have to do, and that's right, Lisa, it happens all the time. How do I more effectively adjust my plan so that it is fluid enough that I can make those changes every day? I'm suggesting that people have a specific plan that is daily in nature. Let's talk about what that looks like. I want to talk about how you can before I give you the steps for productivity, I'm going to talk about what you can do to starve the fear epidemic and what you need to lean into in order to be successful. Now, keep in mind, here's what we're trying to do. If the science says that you don't make good decisions in times of a crisis when you're under threat, then the only thing that we can do is attack that first, because it retracts cortisol out of our system, and then we can have more effective work. First thing to do to starve it to death is turn off the news. I haven't watched a newscast since 2014. I don't watch them. I don't pay attention to them. Yet I think I'm very informed. If you're watching the news at all, you're going to freak yourself out. But if you're constantly dining on what the news is telling you, except for purposes of what you need to do to cope in your business or family, it's too much. The second thing that you can do, and the thing that I think is most important for you to do, is avoid speculative conversations. Here's what happens. People get together, they get in social media, they get in a chat room, those who are still at work will talk at work, and they'll start speculating. They'll say, well, what if the market doesn't come back? And that's happening, this is happening. Your customers are doing the same thing. They're trying to speculate about what's going on. And when you get in speculative conversations, you cannot be productive under pressure. This is the mantra I encourage my clients to use, and I'm going to, is how you can be most helpful. Do not focus on things over which you have no control. If you allow your brain to focus on things over which you have no control, you're going to be crazy. You're absolutely right, Frank. Happiness goes up and anxiety goes down when you stop listening to the news. It's true. Remember, be wisely prepared, take it seriously, but not panic. So first, turn off the news, turn off your news feed. I have no idea where the market is today. My guess is it took another bath. I don't know. And I don't need to know because I can't control it. But I can control what I'm talking about in this webinar. I can control about value that I attempt to pour into your life. I can control that. Now, does that mean I'm like, who cares? No, I got a lot of money in the market. But what I do know is that every time I allow my brain to process danger is a moment where my judgment's clouded and I can't be creative around making myself more productive. Let's talk about the next thing you can do to starve fear to death, and that is focus on wins. Where are you winning in your life and business right now? There's probably a lot of wins. You're probably winning. Most of you are probably healthy. Most of your families are probably healthy. One of the things that you have to do to be able to starve it before you can get more productive, because remember, fear is the enemy of production. Fear is the enemy of productivity. Fear is the enemy of being better, is focus on where you're winning. There are a lot of places to focus on where we're losing right now. The news wants you to focus on that. People want you to focus on that. Friends, family, everybody wants you to focus on that. I heard somebody do a Facebook Live last night who was diagnosed with COVID 2 days ago. And her Facebook Live was so powerful. She's obviously sick. She obviously feels terrible. And she just talked about how uncomfortable she is, of course, because she's sick. But she said that my focus is on winning. My focus is on moving forward. My focus is on what happens next, not on what I'm experiencing now. I thought it was such a beautiful story of how a person in the midst of the crisis is handling it. Next, look at the facts. There is enormous misinformation out there. One person's going to tell you the sky is falling. One person's going to tell you it's only as bad as the flu. One person's going to tell you that the economy will never come back. Somebody sent me a text 2 hours ago and said the structural foundation of the United States is at risk. I mean, there is all kinds of speculation. The fact is, the facts starve fear. The facts that we started this podcast out, or this webinar out on, starve fear. Let's take a look at where you should lean into. These things will help you become more productive. First of all, abundance. We live in the most abundant country in the world. We need to be focusing on where it is. If you live in a place where the climate is good right now, there might be an abundance of sunshine. There might be an abundance of opportunity. There might be an abundance of care, support, and love around you. Then I want you to focus on gratitude. Here's why. What the science has shown is that if you spend 3 minutes per morning immersed in profound and relentless gratitude, your ability to make better decisions will increase exponentially. Your ability to be more creative and more productive will expand exponentially. Finally, focus on the controllables and focus on exactly what you need to do. All right. Now, we've taken care of the psychology. We've taken care of the physiology. I'm going to share with you the steps we're using with our clients and the steps we're using with businesses across North America to stay more productive. You have to follow the system. You have to deal with the physiology, then you deal with the psychology, then you deal with the productivity. Here we go. First thing, I want you to start committing to accomplish one thing daily. Let me give you an example. This isn't getting something done. This is an accomplishment. So, for instance, one of my accomplishments for today was to have a revenue positive impact on my business by the end of the day. That's my accomplishment. So if I can focus on having a revenue positive impact on the business and I can accomplish that one thing by the end of the day, I will have had a productive day. We have to recalibrate what productivity looks like. If I reach into this drawer right here and I pull out one of these, this is one of my personal note cards, and I write 3 of these to people in my sphere, people who are my current customers or previous customers or future customers, and I just write a note of thanks or acknowledgement to be more effective in their lives, to say, I'm thinking about you and I care about you, and I do 5 or 6 of these in a day, I've accomplished something today. We have to we have to rethink through what productivity looks like. The second thing is I want you to begin now to prepare for the recovery by moving forward. I would spend the first hour of every day writing your recovery plan. This is going to end. It'll probably end in the next 60 days. At least it'll taper off in the next 60 days. You don't want to be waiting till then to have your recovery plan moving. Right now, we're working with clients to help them start building the momentum. So as the fervor settles, and it will, it always has, as the fervor settles, we're going to be ready to launch. And so what do you need to do right now today that you can grab control of so that you're ready to start incrementally moving? This is my first ready to launch strategy. We launched a digital strategy. We're doing everything we can to get the world around us ready. So there is nothing, if you're sitting in your house right now, that would keep you from writing notes, from calling your people, customers, colleagues, friends, and say, I'm just checking in to let you know I'm thinking about you. I'm sending good wishes your way. People will remember that when the dust clears. If we just kind of evaporate out of the atmosphere and then we come back when this clears, people are going to start asking questions. Remember that caring about people first is the best way to be productive. It also gets us out of ourselves so that we're living our lives outside of ourselves, not worried. Well, Mike, I'm not worried about me. I'm worried about my kids. Worry is not going to make your kids better. Being smart and doing the right things will. Third, I want you to surround yourself with normal. Now, you guys might be laughing about that, but surrounding yourself with normal simply means, do you have things around you that feel normal? Yesterday in the middle of the day, I went outside, I opened both garage doors, I sat on my motorcycle, and I returned some emails on my phone. That's normal. No, actually, it's abnormal. I never sit on my motorcycle and returned emails, but what I did is it felt normal. I played some music yesterday that felt normal. I surrounded myself with normal. What are you doing to surround yourself with normal? You see, the reduction of abnormal, the news, speculative conversations, bad energy, speculating on what the future holds, is going to cloud out normal if you don't insert normal into the equation. So if you're going to be more productive, one of the things you're going to have to do is commit to accomplishing something, preparing yourself for the recovery because it's coming and you don't want to be caught by surprise, and surrounding yourself with as much normal as possible. For some of you, it's flowers. For some of you, it's music. For some of you, it's making phone calls. I don't know what it is, but the more normal you surround yourself with, the more productive your brain's going to be because it's going to go, okay, not so bad. Next, I want you to plan your day based on what you want to accomplish versus filling your day with non-productive busyness. Now, here's what that means. What that means is that you focus yourself in a time and a place where you are asking yourself, what am I accomplishing right now? I got an email from a very good colleague today that said, I'm so bored, I can't stand it, but I figured out some things that I can do to accomplish something. So let's say you're in sales and you have a CRM. When was the last time you went through your CRM and started asking yourself, when was the last time I was in touch with these people? When was the last time you sat down and spent an hour of your day reaching out to people you haven't reached out to in a long time just to connect with them? When was the last time you sat down and did 1 hour of business planning about what you want your business to look like? I didn't take a call from somebody the other day because I knew it was going to be a catastrophic call. It's a person that manages some element of my life. You see, accomplishment is about this one thing, and I want all of you to hear this because it's very important. Incrementalism is the best thing you can do to be productive. Incrementalism means that you do one small thing that accomplishes something, prepares you for recovery, feels somewhat normal, and makes your day at the end of the day feel like you accomplished something. Here's one of the challenges that you and I are facing. Largely, most of us feel like our lives are in the hands of somebody else. We feel like our lives are basically in the government's hands or in our employer's hands or somewhere else. And largely that is true because largely a lot of our institutions are trying to figure this out as they go along. We've got to pull that back from all the noise that's going on around us and make incremental adjustments as we go through our day. So commit to accomplishing something every day, even if it's small. Begin to prepare for the recovery by moving forward daily, which means creating your recovery plan and beginning to implement it. Yes, Monday I talked to somebody and they shared with me their 5-point strategy for how they're going to build momentum during this difficult time. Now, let me give you a warning. Right now, people are concerned about survival. Rightly or wrongly, good or bad, that's what they're concerned about. So we don't want to come on strong with, I can help you. We want to come on strong with, I care about you. I'm here to add value in any way I can. So we've got to bring back some of that control so that the outside forces who are saying, shelter in place, don't go out of your house, don't do this and don't do that, we don't feel like we're being completely managed by that. So for instance, if I want to get up when this webinar is done and I want to go sit on the patio, I'll likely do that. It's not airborne, it's droplet borne. If you want to go for a walk and that's okay, you've got to take that power back. So what I want you to think about is as soon as we hang out, as soon as I terminate this in just a few minutes, what are you going to do to accomplish something this afternoon, to prepare for the recovery, to surround yourself with normal, and to plan tomorrow based on what you want to accomplish incrementally? What if you decided that you were going to do a Facebook Live and talk about what your family's doing to have a difference? What if you have clients that you could reach out to, provide resources to? What if you came across something that somebody you haven't talked to in a long time could be helpful? The more we're out of us, the better it's going to be. Now, let me talk about final thing. Take action. You must not allow yourself to be paralyzed. We need to be compassionate, but the reality is this circumstance is having worldwide economic impact and worldwide physical impact, much more economic and fear-based than it is physical impact. You got to take action. Even if that action is as simple as turning off the news, even if that action is as simple as reaching out to your database, even if that action is as simple as writing gratitudes, I want you to think of what you could do to start building relationships where people say, holy smokes, you know, the only person who really stayed in touch with me, the only person who really reached out to me, the only person who really engaged with me was a person who went outside of themselves to reach out to me and check on me, to say hello, to build better relationships. How do we give in such a way that the return, the harvest of our energy is better later? Even if that action is simply doing something that returns you to a sense of normal. All right, let's talk about this. There are 5 things I want you to think about every day. These 5 mantras, affirmations, whatever they are going to help you immediately get to a place where we reset your brain and get you more productive at work. Number 1. I want you to say to yourself every day, I am capable of controlling what I listen to and what I watch. Here's the reason this is important. Your brain consumes every day words and images. What the words are that go in your ears and the images that go in your eyes are what your brain uses to determine what's real. Now, here's the problem. Your brain doesn't really know what's real. So what it tends to do is it tends to say, if it's different, it must be dangerous. If there's a 1-hour line outside of Costco, there must be danger. What your clients are doing and what your families are doing and what your employees are doing is exactly the same thing. They're saying, if it's not normal, it must be dangerous. And the more abnormal we allow into our system, the less productive we become. The second thing is, I want you to know, and I want you to say to yourself, there is opportunity everywhere, even if it's from my house. There's opportunity to connect. There's opportunity to build relationships. There is opportunity to do things that are set for me right now. There is opportunity everywhere, even if it doesn't seem like it. But again, if there's noise and mental cloudiness, you cannot leverage opportunity. Opportunity happens when you have clarity of mind, which goes back to the things I suggested just a few minutes ago. Second, and this is big, and this is really important. So here's how your brain evaluates the duration. This is how your brain evaluates threat. It has to do with duration. And duration, if your brain says this is going to last a long time, it has a tendency to amp you up. So when you get your blood taken, if the person says, all right, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, it's all over. You ever seen your kid get a shot and the doctor says 1, 2, 3, it's over? The reason they're doing that is because the brain needs a sense of duration. We don't know the actual duration of what's going on right now, but what we do know for sure is that every day is a step closer to being through this difficulty. Every day you get up and you control what you listen and watch, and you have a plan, and you focus on accomplishments, and you come from abundance and gratitude, every day we're a step closer to it, to being past it. Now, here's the thing I want you to keep in mind. You're going to be a step closer to this all being over regardless. So why wouldn't you take the opportunity to get a step closer to this being over by doing the things we've suggested on this webinar? Why wouldn't you say, you know what, if I'm going to be a step closer to it being over tomorrow, why wouldn't I come from gratitude, relationships, connection, reduction of fear? The fourth thing I want you to think about is this. I want you to think about this notion of, how do I surround myself with what is true and hopeful and kind? I used to be a little bit freaked out by Mr. Rogers, to tell you the truth. I kind of thought, I don't know about a dude that can talk to a trolley. I'm just really not sure about that. And then as I started studying him and thinking about him, I watched the documentary on Mr. Rogers, not Won't You Be My Neighbor by Tom Hanks, but the other one. And I found that one of the things he said was, we need to make kindness popular again. I want us to be wildly compassionate for the people who are dealing with these issues. And I want us to be insanely sensitive to the varying degrees of how people are reacting. Some of you said you were at a 2, some of you said you were at a 10. And so what I want you to think about is, where exactly do you need to be more compassionate, more out there, and where exactly do you need to surround yourself with truth? We've covered a lot of ground today, and one of the things that I think is most important is that you have to be able to think through this idea of how to positively impact the spread of fear and panic. We are either going to contribute to the spread of hysteria and fear, or we are going to contribute to starving it to death. As for me and my house, we're not going to be watching the news. We're not going to be engaging in speculative conversation, no matter how nervous it might feel at any given moment or how low the supplies may get. We're going to continue to press forward, adding value in people's lives. Would you join me? Would you join me in this process of saying, you know what? I can control what I listen to and watch. I can control specific speculative conversation in my life. I can realize that this is temporary, and I can work my way into a process of making that happen. I want to encourage you to start right away with this idea of being kind to yourself, first of all. And whenever you hear that limbic system popping into your head that's saying, hey, you never know, hey, the market's down another blah, blah, I want you to park that and say, what could I do right now to take control back? Could I make a call? Could I write a note? Could I do something different today to make that happen. So what I want to invite you to do right now is I want to invite you right now to think through this notion of how do we more effectively make this something that we come out of feeling like we were the people who understood how to deal with this. We were the people who said, you know what? I can't control everything. I can't control the stock market. I can't control my friends. I can't control craziness. I can't control my clients, but I can control what I allow into my head every day. Now, again, there are a lot of people, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people on this webinar. I want you to hear me say, I'm not saying it's no big deal. And there may be some of you on this webinar that say, I don't care about the psychology. I care about the productivity. Let me say something to you. You can't be more productive until you manage the psychology. These 5 things are ways to do that. All right, let me share with you, we are out of time. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat box. Let me share with you what's gonna happen next. A lot of you have asked if I'm going to share this recording with you. I am. You will probably get it tomorrow morning. So if you registered for this, what we're going to do is we're gonna send you this webinar, recorded exactly as I did it. I'm going to send it to you, and I want you to share it with at least 5 people. What could you do tomorrow morning to say, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to share this 1 hour of time with as many people as I know. Maybe you share it with your database. Maybe you say, hey, here's a guy who specializes in fear and panic. He's helping talk us off the ledge while we deal with it. What could we do more effectively? So you're going to get a copy of the webinar. Several of you have asked for the link that I use to study. I don't have it off the top of my head, but what I'm going to do is ask my team to put that link in the notes for you. So when you open the email tomorrow, you will get the website that I use that tracks worldwide by country, by region, what's happening. Only look at it in the morning, at night. It only updates twice a day. I think it'll give you hope as you look at other countries in the world, and I think it'll help you compartmentalize things. Secondly, we are going to do another webinar next week for leaders and what's happening with leadership in the country and how do we lead more effectively. If there's anything we can do, if there's any value we can add to you and your family or folks or clients or friends or anything, we are standing by to do exactly what we can do to pour massive value. I'll close with this. I want you all to know that one of my primary core values is authenticity. And I thought long and hard about doing this. And I want you to know that everything that we've talked about today will work if you apply it. Start with reality, deal with the psychology, do the things we talked about in terms of starving fear to death, and then do these 5 things. And I am certain that we'll get through this together. We as a country, we as a nation, we have friends, have been through things like this before. We just don't remember. You remember that the world shut down on 9/11. We rallied and came back by focusing on doing what we do best, which is being a nation of community, a nation of caring, and a nation of supporting each other. So I appreciate you spending this time with me today. I hope something I've said has been helpful. Please listen to it again, share it with family and friends. If there's anything we can do, I want you to know that we're going to do everything we can to stand with you and do what we can do to make you better and more effective. Until next time, be healthy, be well, wash your hands, don't panic, and remember, this too shall pass. Take care.